The morning after King Varric's testament was announced, Ethan Carter found himself confined to a modest suite of rooms within Althera Prime's grand citadel. Perched high above a swirling sea of clouds, his quarters offered a breathtaking view of the cosmic dance below, silver tendrils of mist clinging to alabaster spires, and lights from starships gliding in disciplined patterns across the sky. Yet there was no serenity in Ethan's heart. Pacing across a polished floor shot through with thin lines of violet stone, he contemplated the fate that had befallen him, an unheralded betrothal to a princess of a mighty empire. It was preposterous, completely unexpected, and yet, how could he possibly refuse? To do so might shatter the delicate bonds between Earth and the Lumerian realm. Also, a faint longing within him, his natural curiosity, urged him to see what lay behind the Empire's crystalline veneer. A discreet knock on the door interrupted his wandering thoughts. Captain Adrian Surrey, one of the Federation's security liaisons, entered. She gave a brisk salute, her dark hair pulled back in a neat twist that highlighted her no-nonsense gaze. "Ambassador Carter," she said softly, "the Lumerian Council has summoned you. The meeting is in the High Council chamber. They're not offering many details, but I suspect it's about the betrothal." Ethan exhaled slowly, inhaling the crisp air that carried a hint of incense from the Citadel's corridors. "Yes, it must be. I'll go and see what they want." They traversed gleaming hallways lit by ambient crystals embedded in high arches. Their light pulsed in time with cosmic rhythms, so that each breath of illumination seemed like the pulse of a living organism. Each step took Ethan closer to the seat of Lumerian authority, and deeper into a tangled web of political tension. Finally, a pair of towering doors slid open with a soft whisper, revealing the High Council chamber, its walls adorned with ethereal sculptures that seemed to shift color depending on the angle of observation. A line of Lumerian counselors, each clad in garments made of shimmering scales, stood waiting. Their faces were impassive, their gazes difficult to read. At the center stood High Counselor Meraxis, a tall figure with skin so translucent it might have been carved from pale amethyst. Every muscle moved with uncanny grace, embodying the genetic perfection that had been refined through centuries of selective engineering. "Ambassador Ethan Carter," Meraxis announced, addressing him with a cool, resonant voice. "We have summoned you to clarify the matter of King Varric's will. The king's final decree is binding under our imperial law, but your acceptance is not guaranteed." Ethan took a deep breath, measured, careful. "I understand. As the representative of Earth, I was as surprised as anyone to learn of this arrangement. But I have not declined. Indeed, I have asked to speak with the princess, if that is permissible." A ripple of mild disapproval flickered through the other counselors. Meraxis inclined his head slightly. "Princess Celera is still in mourning for her father, as are we all, yet the matter of her betrothal takes precedence. We understand you wish to see her. That can be arranged, but we do not guarantee you the freedom to question the legality or necessity of this arrangement. The Lumerian Empire will not easily alter the final wishes of our departed king." Ethan met Meraxis's gaze steadily. "I do not presume to question your laws, counselor. I only wish to understand the princess's will in this matter, and perhaps to glean why the king made such a choice." The faintest quirk at the corner of Meraxis's mouth betrayed surprise. "Very well. You shall meet her, but be warned. Many among our people find this union distasteful. The princess's alleged flaws do not lessen her royal blood, but they also do not make her a suitable match for an unmodified human, at least in their eyes. Tread carefully, Ambassador Carter." With that, the meeting concluded, the counselors retreating behind a polished screen in the far alcove. Ethan stood there, tension winding through him. Captain Surrey placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, but said nothing. The door behind them slid open, beckoning them back into the labyrinth of corridors. Outside, luminous etchings on the wall seemed to glimmer in subtle patterns, as though echoing the unsettled energies swirling around them. The question burned in Ethan's mind. Why had King Varric chosen him, of all beings, to wed the Lumerian princess? What deeper secret lay hidden behind that royal decree? He had no answers yet, but the first step had been taken. Soon, he would stand before Princess Celera, the so-called flawed heir to the Lumerian throne. And in her eyes, he suspected, he might finally discover the truth that would guide him through this perilous new chapter of his life. 2 days later, in a chamber overlooking the swirling nebula outside Althera Prime, Ethan stood waiting. Tall windows of reinforced crystal framed the deep violet void, a backdrop of distant stars that lent the room a timeless, dreamlike quality. Soft drapes, woven from the silver silk of Lumerian worms, stirred in a gentle, climate-controlled breeze. Ethan's breath felt tight in his chest, for he was about to meet Princess Celera face to face. He had heard the rumors. She bore small, mottled patches of blue scales, irregularly shaped, that dotted her arms and shoulders. Her eyes were said to be overly large and dark for a Lumerian, showing a soulful glint rather than the cold, refractive shine typical of her kin. These minor deviations from the Lumerian ideal had marked her as defective from birth. The Empire's aristocracy, obsessed with perfection, had eyed her with a mixture of pity and fear, worried her lineage might undermine their carefully sculpted gene pools. Yet, by all accounts, King Varek had adored his daughter. She had been his sole joy in his final years, even as his empire championed outward displays of flawlessness. He kept her close, protecting her from the scornful gazes of the aristocracy, ensuring she never felt lesser than any of their polished lords and ladies. Why he would take the unprecedented step of joining her to a human from Earth, however, remained an enigma that plagued the entire Federation. The door slid open, nearly soundless, and Princess Celera entered, flanked by 2 attendants. At first glance, Ethan could see the subtle differences that set her apart from other Lumerians he had encountered. True, her posture was dignified, graceful even, but she did not have the same uncanny translucence as her kindred. Instead, pale cerulean scales shimmered across her arms, slightly uneven, reminding him of patterns on ocean stones. Her face, framed by cascading, opalescent hair, was both regal and gentle, her eyes large and warm, a far cry from the cool, gemstone eyes of the Lumerian elite. They regarded each other quietly for a long moment. Ethan inclined his head in greeting, offering the respectful bow Earth's diplomats used for royalty. She nodded in return, a gesture that spoke of composed courtesy. "Ambassador Carter," she said, her voice low and melodic. "We meet at last." "Your Highness," he replied, "it is an honor to be in your presence. I only wish the circumstances were less confusing." She lifted her chin slightly, her eyes flicking to her attendants. They took the hint and withdrew a few paces, giving them space to speak in confidence. Celera's gaze found Ethan's, searching for signs of mockery or condescension, both of which she was clearly used to. But Ethan only gave her the open, earnest expression of a man who was out of his element, yet trying his best. "I understand you have been informed of my father's will," she said, a faint tremor coloring her words. "I assume you come here to voice your protest, like so many others, or to question my place in the Empire." Surprised by the directness of her query, Ethan shook his head. "No, Princess. Truthfully, I'm here because, well, I want to know who you are. This arrangement was a shock to me, and I don't doubt it was a shock to you as well. But I'm not here to insult you or your father's memory." Her features softened, and for a moment, her poised demeanor cracked, revealing a flicker of vulnerability. "I have been told all my life that I am flawed," she murmured, glancing at the flecks of blue that marred the pearly white skin of her forearm. "When I was very young, my father insisted these marks and my strange eyes were part of a grand tapestry, that I was destined for something greater than the closed-minded beliefs of our aristocracy." I clung to his words, even when others whispered behind my back. She hesitated, as though uncertain how much to reveal. Then, mustering courage, she continued, "He never spoke of this betrothal to me, never hinted that he intended to pledge me to a human ambassador. Yet here we stand." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Something about her sincerity, her soft-spoken pride, resonated within him. He chose his next words carefully, aware of the weight they carried. "Your father must have had his reasons," he offered. "And if he had faith in you, Princess, perhaps he saw that same quality in me. It's possible this union is meant to unite more than just our peoples. It may open doors that have been locked for too long." Her gaze flickered with interest. "You speak with a diplomat's tact, Ambassador. But I sense genuine curiosity beneath your words. not hollow flattery. Tell me honestly, do you find my appearance repulsive? The question, so direct and tinged with hurt, startled Ethan. He shook his head firmly. Not at all. Your Highness, you're far from repulsive. You're remarkable, different, yes, but in a way that's refreshing. I've seen so many genetically engineered faces, all symmetrical perfection, that they start to blend together. But you are unique, and that's not something to be ashamed of. A slight flush crossed her features, a subtle pink tinge that Lumerians rarely exhibited. She clasped her hands together, careful with her spined fingertips. I did not expect such kindness, she admitted. Though my father often praised me in private, I have rarely heard anyone speak favorably of my differences. Most who visit our court either pity me or ignore me. Ethan offered a reassuring smile, the tension in the room receding. If we're to navigate this situation together, perhaps we should start by understanding each other. You are, after all, the future of your empire, and I'm just a man from Earth who finds himself in extraordinary circumstances. Celera took a measured breath. The council demands we uphold my father's will. They want a swift ceremony to ensure no disruptions threaten the empire's stability in the wake of his death. But she hesitated, looking out the window at the distant stars. I'm not sure I can do it. Even if I believe in my father's vision, the scorn of our people weighs heavily on me, and I know nothing of Earth's customs, or of you, Ambassador Carter. Ethan gently reached out, though he did not quite touch her hand. Then let's see if we can learn, together. I'm no stranger to adversity, Princess. Earth has had to fight to earn respect in this federation, and we've done so with open minds and hearts. I can't promise to make this easy, but I can promise I won't belittle you or treat you like a pawn in a political game. Her eyes, so large and expressive, shone with a cautious hope. Then let us speak more, on calmer occasions, so we might discover why my father chose you, and what it means for our future. They lingered in that chamber a while longer, exchanging soft words and hesitant smiles. Though they remained in the shadow of King Varek's unexpected will, an ember of trust began to glow between them. And in the distant corners of the citadel, watchers whispered, wondering what would become of this unlikely pair, a human envoy and a flawed princess who might yet hold the fate of an empire in her hands. The Lumerian imperial palace on Althera Prime was less a single building and more a glittering fortress of spires, bridges, and suspended platforms, each one painstakingly carved from shimmering crystal. Observers standing below would see prismatic light cascading down, a perpetual reminder of the empire's grandeur. From the council chambers to the private royal apartments, everything was designed to reflect an ethos of immaculate beauty and unblemished symmetry. As Ethan walked through those corridors, escorted by two tall Lumerian guards, he sensed the weight of centuries pressing down on him. The palace's halls were lined with life-sized figures of past monarchs, each statue capturing some mark of their genetic perfection. One had eyes shaped to mimic swirling galaxies, another boasted a mane of color-changing hair, and yet another had skin so polished it rivaled the finest gemstone. Their gazes seemed to follow Ethan, as if judging his lack of enhancements. He was led to a receiving chamber where a gathering of aristocrats awaited him. The Lumerian lords and ladies stood in clusters, their garments reflecting every color of the spectrum. Ethan noticed how intently they scrutinized him, some with thinly veiled disdain, others with calculating curiosity. Among them was Counselor Meraxis, presiding over this assembly as though it were a performance. Beside him stood a younger counselor, Lady Isona, famed for her flawless silver scales. Her face showed an icy politeness as she turned her attention to Ethan. "Ambassador Carter," she said in a smoothly measured tone, "we are pleased you have joined us. We wish to begin preparing you for the official betrothal ceremony. Though your biology is unmodified, we must ensure that the union aligns with Lumerian traditions." Ethan glanced around the room. "I'll do my best to respect your customs," he replied cautiously. "But I also ask that you respect mine. Earth has its own cultural heritage." A faint ripple of amusement traveled through the aristocrats. Lady Isona raised a carefully arched brow. "Indeed, we shall take Earth's customs into account as well. However, the Empire's edicts are not negotiable. King Varek made a perplexing choice, but we must obey it." One of the lords, a tall figure with eyes like shimmering emerald shards, stepped forward. "Forgive me, Ambassador, but might I speak plainly? We find it peculiar that King Varek would select a human to marry the princess. Your people have been admitted to the Federation relatively recently, and you have not undergone any of the advanced genetic engineering we consider standard. Why would King Varek gamble the future of his daughter, and indeed our empire, on such a chance pairing?" Ethan felt the intensity of their collective gaze. He spread his hands in a gesture of sincerity. "I share your confusion, my lord. King Varek never confided in me personally. I knew him only as a respected monarch, one who always listened intently during Federation negotiations. I suppose he saw something in me, or in humanity, that the rest of you have not yet acknowledged." At that, Lady Isona's lips curved in a thin smile, her tone growing sharper. "You speak as though your species has much to offer us. Perhaps your unmodified genes hide an advantage we have overlooked? A hidden brilliance? Resilience?" The sardonic tilt in her voice suggested she found the idea improbable. Ethan, sensing the tension, chose his words carefully. "We humans are far from perfect, Lady Isona, but we adapt and persevere. We value individuality. On Earth, we know that differences can be strengths. Perhaps that is the rationale behind King Varek's decision." A hush fell upon the crowd, as though Ethan's words had touched a nerve. The Lumerians prided themselves on their controlled, engineered qualities. Any suggestion that imperfection might be valuable was almost blasphemous. Yet, ironically, they had a princess whose very existence challenged their ideals. Counselor Meraxis, feeling the shift in mood, intervened. "We will not settle these philosophical questions today. For now, let us abide by the formalities. Ambassador Carter, you will attend the preludial ceremony in 3 days' time, where you and Princess Celera shall publicly accept each other's vows. After that, a more elaborate wedding will occur in the Lumerian homeland, beneath the mirrored domes of the Empire's capital. We ask that you cooperate fully for the Empire's sake." Ethan inclined his head. "I will." The group dispersed, leaving behind hushed murmurs and sidelong glances. Before departing, Ethan managed to catch a glimpse of a distant corridor where Princess Celera stood, partially concealed by a drape of silver silk. Their eyes met, her soft gaze reflecting both apprehension and a tentative warmth. In that fleeting moment, Ethan silently vowed he would do whatever it took to defend her dignity. If the entire empire saw her as flawed, and his presence as unwelcome, then perhaps he would be the shield between her and their scorn. Whatever King Varek's motives, Ethan could not stand by and let Celera bear this storm alone. The preludial ceremony arrived swiftly. Held in a grand hall beneath a vaulted ceiling of refractive crystal, the occasion brought together aristocrats, council members, and dignitaries from various Federation worlds. Illuminated by shifting patterns of starlight, each attendee shimmered in a dazzling array of fabrics and adornments. Whispers of speculation buzzed in the air like static electricity, all centered on the union of Princess Celera and Ambassador Ethan Carter. Ethan stood at one end of the hall, dressed in a formal Earth suit adorned with subtle nods to Lumerian culture, a silver thread woven along the lapels, matched by faint touches of opalescent fabric around. The cuffs. It was a modest attire by Lumerian standards, but it displayed his willingness to bridge cultural gaps. Across the expanse of the crystalline floor, Princess Celera made her entrance. A hush fell over the assembly as she glided forward, draped in an elegant gown that accentuated her cerulean scales rather than hiding them. Her eyes, large and reflective, took in every astonished stare, yet she held her head high, letting the music of the ceremony swell around her. For heralds, each bearing ceremonial staffs topped with glowing orbs, stepped forward to form a diamond around the princess. The orbs cast a gentle light that swayed in time with an inaudible resonance, a subtle vibration of the Empire's spiritual tradition. When they reached Ethan, Princess Celera paused, lowering her gaze for a moment before lifting it again to meet his. Behind them, a dais rose, where Counselor Meraxis presided. He extended his arms, and the hush became absolute. "We gather to honor the final decree of our late King Varek," he intoned. "By ancient right, we witness the pledge of union between Princess Celera, heir to Lemuria, and Ethan Carter, Ambassador of Earth. Let the preludial vows be spoken, so that all present may know their truth and bear witness to the path of destiny. Ethan stepped forward, his throat tight. He was acutely aware of the sea of eyes upon him, many of them disapproving, some curious, and a few outright hostile. But he drew courage from the calm in Solara's gaze. "I, Ethan Carter," he began, "stand here in honor of King Varrex's will, and in respect for the Lumerian Empire. I offer my commitment to Princess Solara, to walk beside her in friendship and alliance, and to learn from her and her people as we shape a future that unites our worlds." He paused, feeling a subtle tremor in his chest. "I vow to protect her dignity, her spirit, and her right to stand unashamed in her differences, as we all stand unashamed in ours." An audible murmur swept the crowd. This emphasis on respecting flaws was bold in a realm that exalted perfection. Still, Ethan maintained his composure, keeping his gaze on the princess. Princess Solara inclined her head, and in a clear, resonant voice, she spoke her vow. "I, Solara of Lemuria, daughter of King Varrex, accept the decree set forth by my father's will. I grant Ethan Carter my pledge to work in harmony, to uphold the bonds of unity between our peoples, and to let compassion guide our union, despite the winds of scorn that may blow against us." She hesitated, letting her scales catch the refracted light, then continued, "I vow to honor the strengths in our differences, believing that in imperfection we may find unexpected power." A hush lingered, as though the entire hall held its breath. Counselor Meraxis, measuring every word, declared, "So the preludial vows are spoken. In 3 cycles, the final ceremony shall be held in the capital, sealing this union before the Empire's ancient altars. May it bring stability in the wake of our king's passing." With that, the ceremony ended, the crowd erupting into a mixture of applause and subdued commentary. Ethan and Solara stood side by side, each bound by words spoken in public, their future entangled in an arrangement neither fully controlled. Yet, as they exited the hall, she quietly turned to him and whispered, "Thank you for speaking as you did. You are bold, Ambassador." He smiled slightly, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. "We humans can be quite stubborn when it comes to defending what we believe in." She nodded, and for the first time in the presence of her people, her features softened in a gentle smile. As they moved through the throng, Ethan noticed that the aristocrats parted for Solara, giving her a wider berth than they might have given another royal. Some turned their faces away, unwilling to acknowledge her presence, while others looked on with veiled interest, perhaps reevaluating their preconceived notions. Amid the sea of glimmering fabrics and shining scales, a single figure, Lady Isona, stood poised like a polished statue. Her cold, penetrating stare followed Solara and Ethan, a silent rebuke dancing in her perfect eyes. Ethan could not read her thoughts, but he sensed caution was in order. He was certain that not everyone welcomed this union, and behind the splendid facade of the ceremony, forces might already be at work to undermine it. Yet for now, he took comfort in the fact that he and Solara had managed to stand together, if only for this brief moment. The preludial vows had been sealed, and the path to the final wedding in the capital stretched out before them like a shimmering road into the unknown. In the days that followed the preludial ceremony, Ethan found himself in a whirlwind of diplomatic affairs. His scheduled duties as Earth's ambassador did not pause, even in the face of the looming royal wedding. He attended sector negotiations regarding trade routes, mediated minor disputes between less prominent species, and fielded endless questions from curious Federation officials about his impending marriage. Princess Solara, meanwhile, was inundated by the Lumerian Council, who pressed her to adopt certain protocols. They recommended that she keep herself as hidden as possible until the final ceremony, in order to avoid unnecessary provocation of the Empire's more conservative elements. Solara, though accustomed to seclusion, struggled with this renewed confinement. It was a late hour when Ethan finally managed to request a private conference with her, free from prying eyes. The location was an enclosed terrace overlooking the swirling mists of Althera Prime, a place seldom visited at night. Crystalline pillars rose around them, carved into shapes resembling ancient Lemurian beasts, their eyes filled with faintly glowing stones. Solara arrived, escorted by only one attendant, who remained at a respectful distance. The princess wore a simple gown, pale silver in hue, accentuating the delicate blue patterns running along her arms. She appeared weary, the weight of the council's demands evident in her posture. "How are you holding up?" Ethan asked gently. "We haven't had a chance to speak since the ceremony." She sighed, smoothing a hand over her opalescent hair. "It's been difficult. The council bombards me with instructions, how to move, how to speak, how to hide my flaws. As if I could peel away my own scales or mask the shape of my eyes. They want me to present as close to a conventional Lumerian princess as possible, so as not to offend the Empire's delicate ideals. Yet, King Varexwell has forced them to accept me as I am." Her tone carried a blend of sorrow and frustration. Ethan felt a stab of empathy, recalling the stifling rules Earth's earliest spacefarers had faced when encountering societies that prized homogeneity. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Your father wanted a future where you wouldn't have to hide. At least, that's the impression I got." Her gaze flicked up to his. "Did my father ever speak to you directly about me, or about his plans?" Ethan shook his head. He was guarded, even though he was cordial in Federation meetings. I could sense he had grand ideas, but I had no clue they involved me until after his passing. She fell silent, looking out over the mist-shrouded architecture. Soft lights danced across the spires, a silent reflection of the swirling cosmos beyond. "Sometimes," she said at last, "I wonder if the old legends about the Lumerian lineage hold some key. My father used to tell me stories about our ancestors, how they were said to be chosen by star-forged energies, how our empire's greatest achievements came not from sterile perfection, but from the occasional anomalies that unlocked new potential." Her fingers brushed against the scales on her arm. "I used to dream that my so-called flaws were actually part of something important, something the Empire had forgotten. Father believed it too, but as he grew older, he faced constant pressure to maintain the facade of excellence." Ethan stepped closer, his voice soft yet resolute. "If that's the truth, if your flaws are actually a path to something greater, then it's worth uncovering. Don't let the council bury your identity just to soothe their pride." She turned to him, and for a moment, he caught the sparkle of tears in her eyes. "You speak as though you trust me," she said, her voice scarcely above a whisper. "I do," he answered. "I see no reason not to." Her lips trembled into a cautious smile. Then, as if recalling something, she added, "The final ceremony is in 2 days. After that, we'll depart for the Lumerian capital, a place I've only visited a few times. The Empire's genealogical archives are kept there, along with all manner of ancient artifacts. Perhaps we can learn more about why my father believed in me, and in you." Ethan nodded, feeling a stir of determination. "Let's. If there's a mystery in your lineage, we should solve it together." In the distance, the solitary attendant shifted, signaling that time was running short. Celera caught Ethan's eye with a gentle urgency. "Be careful, Ambassador. Not everyone in the council wishes us well, and I fear that behind their polished smiles, they might orchestrate something to derail this union or to discredit you." He nodded soberly. "I'll keep my guard up. And, Princess, if you ever feel cornered, remember you're not alone in this anymore." Celera let out a breath, as though a small burden had lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you, Ethan. Your presence eases a loneliness I've carried for so long. I only hope our alliance bears fruit worthy of the trust my father placed in us." They parted with a quiet understanding, the mist swirling around them like a veil drawn between hidden truths and the brilliant future just beyond the horizon. And though neither spoke the words, both felt the dawn of an unexpected companionship taking root, one that would challenge the rigid laws of a proud empire, daring to light a spark of change in the very heart of perfection. When the appointed day arrived, a sleek Lumerian royal cruiser awaited Ethan and Celera at the docking platforms of Althera Prime. Carved from transparent materials that reflected starlight with dazzling intensity, the craft embodied both Lumerian artistry and technological prowess. Its interior, however, was subdued, designed for comfort during the journey to the Empire's capital world, Lemuria Prime. Ethan settled into a plush seat beside the princess, his eyes scanning the panels of softly pulsating lights that lined the cabin. A subtle hum coursed through the deck as the cruiser rose from the platform, gliding through Althera Prime's upper atmosphere before transitioning to faster-than-light travel in a burst of prismatic energy. Celera watched the process with a quiet, thoughtful air. Her royal attendants remained near the back of the cabin, giving the betrothed pair a semblance of privacy. "This is only my second time traveling to Lemuria Prime in my adult life," she confided. "I spent most of my childhood hidden away in one of the Empire's lesser estates, to shield me from the scorn of the court. But now, with father gone, they have no choice but to let me inherit my title. Yet still, I feel like a stranger in my own homeland." Ethan reached for her hand, hesitating a second before lightly touching her scaled fingertips. "Then we explore it together. I'd imagine it's more than just a world of polished towers. There must be places of wonder, traditions that exist beyond the aristocracy's gaze." She offered a tentative nod, her eyes warming at his gesture. "I'd like that. My father used to speak of the vast crystal forests near the equator, where sunlight refracts into every color imaginable, and ancient creatures roam in harmony beneath the shimmering boughs. Part of me always yearned to see such marvels, to understand the richness of my people beyond the narrow corridors of high society." Their conversation continued in hushed tones, weaving bits of their personal histories and hopes. Meanwhile, the cruiser traversed subspace, carrying them ever closer to Lemuria Prime. A few hours later, the craft smoothly re-entered normal space, revealing a planet wreathed in shimmering oceans, continents draped in lavender vegetation, and polar caps glimmering with crystalline ice. As they descended through the atmosphere, Ethan felt his pulse quicken. The capital city spread out beneath them, a collection of grand spires, bridges, and dome-like structures that reflected the planet's bright sun in dazzling displays of color. Towering ramparts of semi-translucent stone encircled the city center, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns that told the story of Lemuria's founding. A designated landing platform awaited the royal cruiser. A crowd of onlookers had gathered, kept behind golden barricades by palace guards in ornate armor. The moment the vessel touched down, a gentle hush fell, as though the entire city took a collective breath. The main hatch opened, and Ethan emerged behind Celera, blinking in the radiant daylight. The Lumerian sun cast a warm glow, making the princess's cerulean scales shimmer with a subtle, iridescent gleam. A hush rippled through the throng of citizens. Many bowed in respect, yet some among them exchanged uneasy glances, unsettled by the sight of their flawed princess returning, hand in hand with an off-worlder. Awaiting them at the edge of the platform stood a retinue of officials, arched posture, brilliant eyes, and robes woven from living crystal threads. At their head was an older noblewoman, Lady Averine, whom Celera introduced in a reserved tone. "Welcome, Princess Celera," Lady Averine intoned, her voice cool yet tinged with formality. "The Empire grieves the loss of our beloved King Varric, but it is our great honor to receive his heir. And Ambassador Ethan Carter of Earth, we extend to you the courtesy befitting a royal consort to be." Though the words were polite, Ethan sensed an undercurrent of disapproval. He bowed gracefully, recalling everything he'd learned about Lumerian etiquette. "Thank you, Lady Averine. We come in hope of understanding and cooperation." The older noblewoman merely offered a perfunctory nod before leading them into a grand procession toward the palace gates. The architecture along the route rivaled anything Ethan had seen, even on Althera Prime. Translucent towers curved skyward, etched with glowing runes, and wide boulevards sparkled beneath footfalls, reflecting pastel hues of the local flora that lined the walkways. Everywhere they went, people stopped to stare. Many gazes were curious, some openly disapproving, and a few were cautiously friendly. Celera held her head high, but Ethan sensed the tension in her posture. He offered a gentle squeeze of her hand, hoping to convey silent reassurance. At last, they arrived at the main palace, a sprawling complex of interlocking domes, each topped with a towering spire. Within its marble halls, the air carried the faint scent of exotic flowers, while sunlight refracted through artful skylights. Courtiers thronged about, their movements precise and their manners impeccably rehearsed. Celera was escorted away by attendants who insisted she needed rest and preparation for the final wedding ceremony. Ethan, however, was taken under guard by a small retinue of Lumerian officials, who deemed it necessary to orient him to the palace's protocols. As the towering doors closed behind the princess, Ethan felt the weight of the empire pressing down on him. He had set foot in a realm where perfection was law, and any deviation drew sharp judgment. Here, Princess Celera was more vulnerable than ever, her imperfections on full display for a populace that revered flawless symmetry. Yet, as Ethan was led deeper into the palace's labyrinthine corridors, he held onto a fierce determination. Something in Celera's lineage, and in her father's final decree, pointed to a deeper truth, one that threatened the very foundations of Lumerian pride. And if Ethan had any say in it, he would ensure that truth came to light, no matter how many polished corridors or disapproving gazes he had to traverse. Late that evening, under the pale glow of the Lumerian moon, Ethan slipped away from his guard's watchful eye. He had been given a sumptuous guest chamber overlooking the palace gardens, but the ceremonial politeness of his hosts felt like a gilded cage. He wanted to find Celera, to see how she was coping, and to discuss the strange hints about her ancestral heritage. Navigating the corridors proved challenging. Each hallway looked remarkably similar, and the palace's grandeur concealed many hidden passages. At times, Ethan felt as though the walls themselves were shifting, the refractive surfaces playing tricks on his senses. Eventually, he reached a quieter wing, where the ornate pillars and archways gave way to simpler, more subdued decorations. He came upon a wide balcony, edged with carved balustrades. Outside, the moonlight bathed the gardens below, casting long shadows across the floral patterns. He heard a soft voice drifting through the air, a hushed melody. Drawing closer, he found Princess Celera standing by the balcony rail, humming a gentle tune. She turned at his approach, her eyes reflecting the moon's silver glow. "Ethan," she whispered, surprise fluttering across her features. "How did you find me?" "I followed the music," he said softly. "I'm sorry if I startled you. I just needed to see if you were all right." She offered him a small smile, though he could see the weariness in her posture. "I'm glad you came. Sometimes I feel suffocated here, with all the eyes on me, expecting me to conform to a standard I can never meet." Ethan leaned against the balustrade beside her, taking in the fragrances of nocturnal blossoms that perfumed the air. "Maybe you shouldn't try to meet it," he suggested quietly. "Trying to please everyone who disapproves of you seems impossible. You are who you are." She sighed, gazing out over the moonlit garden. "I understand the logic of that, yet it's different when an entire empire breathes down your neck. They want their princess to be a shining example of perfection, especially now, when the throne stands vulnerable. But I've always been the unsightly blemish on Lemuria's pristine record." Ethan gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "If you were truly an unsightly blemish, why did King Varric cherish you above all else?" She closed her eyes for a moment, as if conjuring memories of her father's voice. "Because he knew secrets no one else did," she finally said. "It goes back to our earliest ancestors, those with abilities linked to cosmic energies. Father told me, in hushed tones, that my particular genetic traits might connect to something ancient, something that was deliberately bred out of the Lumerian line centuries ago, for reasons lost to time. He never fully explained, but he hinted that these differences in me might be vital to our future." Ethan nodded slowly, recalling Earth's own history of disregarding or persecuting those who bore unique traits, only to realize too late those traits carried hidden strengths. "Have you tried to research your lineage? Maybe we can find records in the Empire's archives." "I attempted it once before, but my father's chief archivist barred me from certain sections," Celera admitted. She claimed it was for my own safety, that I might stir up superstitions from the ancient wars, when Lemuria was nearly conquered by a rival clan. But those clan lines have vanished into history. A flicker of determination lit her gaze. "Now that I'm princess, and father has willed that I be recognized, perhaps I have the authority to access those archives. If we can uncover what my father discovered, maybe we can prove to the Empire that imperfection is not a weakness." Ethan squeezed her shoulder gently in encouragement. "I'd do anything to help, Celera. You've shown remarkable courage just living under this scrutiny. Let's find the truth together." She placed her hand over his, her scales cool under his warmth. "Thank you, Ethan." She paused, as if unsure whether to voice the next thought. I'm not sure if our marriage was ever truly about forging a political alliance. Perhaps my father believed you. A human whose people value individuality would accept me unconditionally. And maybe your unmodified genetics have some role to play as well. Ethan felt a rush of empathy. Even if it started as an arrangement, that doesn't mean we can't make it something real. I won't pretend to understand everything about Lumerian culture, but I know acceptance when I see it. And you deserve it. She looked up at him, her dark, expressive eyes reflecting the starlight, and in them, Ethan saw gratitude, relief, and a hint of budding affection. For a moment, the vast palace and its constraints faded away, leaving only two souls connecting beneath the cosmic canopy. But the tranquility was short-lived. A shadow fell across the balcony. One of Solara's attendants stood in the arched entrance, her eyes downcast, but her tone urgent. "Princess, the council is searching for you. They insist you return to your chambers at once, to prepare for tomorrow's public appearance." Solara exhaled, tension coiling back into her posture. She offered Ethan an apologetic glance. "I must go. They'll cause a scene if they think I'm wandering the halls at night." Ethan nodded, letting his hand fall away from her shoulder. "I understand. We'll talk again soon, and we'll find those archives." She hesitated before departing, her gaze lingering on him. Then, with a final, soft smile, she vanished into the corridor, the attendant hurrying behind her. Left alone on the moonlit balcony, Ethan felt a surge of determination. Something crucial lay buried in Lemuria's past and in Solara's genetic code. The final wedding ceremony loomed, but beyond that, a greater quest beckoned, unearthing the heritage that King Varek had guarded, the heritage that might reshape not only Solara's life, but the entire empire's notion of what it meant to be strong, whole, and worthy. The final wedding ceremony took place in the heart of the palace complex, beneath a towering rotunda constructed of transparent crystal. The structure soared hundreds of feet overhead, allowing sunlight to cascade down in kaleidoscopic rays. Below, an immense circular floor of polished stone served as the stage for the grand ritual. Dignitaries from every corner of the Galactic Federation had gathered, along with the highest-ranking Lumerian nobles. Vibrant banners depicting the Empire's crest rippled in the gentle breeze, while distant choirs sang ethereal harmonies reminiscent of distant star winds. Ethan stood on one side of the dais, adorned in a ceremonial robe designed for him by Lumerian tailors. Interwoven with earth fabrics, the outfit was a fusion of styles that symbolized the union of two worlds. He felt the weight of every gaze, the spotlight of scrutiny upon his unmodified human form. And yet, he stood tall, recalling his vow to protect Solara's dignity. At last, the princess arrived, her entrance announced by a trumpet-like instrument that resonated across the rotunda. Solara's gown was breathtaking, threads of shimmering silver and blue, woven in intricate patterns that seemed to swirl like water over her body. The design accentuated her mottled scales rather than hiding them, a bold statement of self-acceptance. She approached Ethan, her eyes meeting his with a quiet resolve that spoke of both apprehension and fierce determination. The officiant, an elderly Lumerian priest, his robes covered in glowing runes, began reciting the ancient words of binding. "In the name of the cosmic energies that shaped our realm," the priest intoned, "we unite Princess Solara of the Lumerian Empire and Ambassador Ethan Carter of Earth, in accordance with King Varek's final decree. May this union bring prosperity, harmony, and new revelations to our people." He gestured for the princess and ambassador to place their hands on a floating crystal orb. Solara and Ethan complied, each resting a palm against the orb's surface. A soft glow ignited within it, pulsating like a living heartbeat. Suddenly, the glow intensified, a sharp beam of light shooting out from the orb and lancing up toward the rotunda's apex. Gasps rippled through the gathered audience. The priest, momentarily startled, tried to maintain composure. "This is but the light of unity," he declared, though uncertainty laced his voice. "A sign that the Empire acknowledges their bond." But even as he spoke, the beam of light danced, breaking apart into smaller rays that formed intricate geometric patterns on the crystal ceiling. Murmurs swept the crowd. Something about Solara's touch seemed to be interacting with the orb in a manner no one had anticipated. Ethan sensed Solara's hand trembling. He gently squeezed her fingers. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're in this together." The officiant cleared his throat, attempting to quell the rising unease. "Princess Solara, Ambassador Carter, do you swear to uphold each other, to share your strengths, to guide our empire into a new era of cooperation?" They exchanged solemn looks. "I do," Ethan said quietly. "I do," Solara echoed. In that moment, the orb's glow abruptly faded, as though some invisible force had siphoned its energy. The priest, with a slight quiver in his voice, proclaimed them bound in the eyes of the empire. Polite applause spread through the assembly, but many faces displayed confusion, as if expecting something more grand or less unsettling. And then, as a final flourish, the roof of the rotunda opened like a blossoming flower. The crowd turned their faces upward, witnessing a shower of refracted sunlight spill into the space, a dazzling salute to the newly married couple. Yet amid this spectacle, Ethan and Solara exchanged a private, knowing glance. Something extraordinary had occurred, a fleeting display of ancient power when Solara touched the orb. Neither understood it fully, but it left them both certain that King Varric's prophecy of Solara's unique potential was no mere myth. That evening, after the festivities died down and the palace fell into a more subdued revelry, they found each other in a secluded part of the sprawling gardens. Hand in hand, they slipped away from the watchful eyes of courtiers, determined to investigate the phenomenon further. With hushed voices, they made their way to a lesser-known wing of the palace archives, guided by an old blueprint Solara had unearthed from her father's study. Tall shelves, filled with crystalline tablets and archaic scrolls, cast spidery shadows in the dim lamplight. "This section is restricted," Solara murmured, hesitating at a locked gate. "I was forbidden to enter here before, but now that I am princess and bound by the will of the late king, perhaps I have the authority to override this." She placed her palm on a scanning panel, her scales glowing faintly under the device's light. The gate clicked open. They slipped inside, hearts pounding with anticipation. Rows upon rows of ancient texts greeted them, each detailing lost knowledge of Lumerian lore. A faint hum pervaded the air, as though the archives themselves were alive with stored energies. Eventually, they found a small chamber housing a curious device, a pedestal with a crystal sphere lodged at its center. This sphere bore a striking resemblance to the one used in their wedding ceremony, though it radiated a deeper, more primal glow. Ethan approached it cautiously. "It looks old, older than any other relic I've seen in your empire," he whispered. Solara nodded, her gaze transfixed by the swirling patterns within the crystal. "If I recall Father's tales correctly, this might be the Star Crown, an artifact said to resonate with Lumerian bloodlines that carry certain ancient markers." She reached out, her fingers hovering just above the sphere's surface. A visible ripple of energy coursed across the device, stirring the dust around them. Ethan sucked in a breath. "That's it. That same reaction we saw at the ceremony." Solara slowly placed her hand on the sphere. A swirl of light coalesced inside, forming shifting shapes that almost looked like constellations. Her eyes widened. "I can feel it. It's like a pulse, matching my own heartbeat." With her other hand, she beckoned Ethan closer. "Try touching it too. Maybe our union. Maybe your presence will change its response." Cautiously, Ethan laid his hand atop hers, his human skin brushing her scaled palm. The sphere flared with sudden brilliance, patterns flickering across its surface. A low hum vibrated through the chamber, as if an ancient mechanism were stirring back to life. A vision, faint, yet undeniable, flickered before their eyes. Ghostly outlines of Lumerian ancestors performing rituals, forging alliances with unseen cosmic forces. Then, like a whisper borne on a solar wind, a phrase echoed in their minds. "Within the flawed, the true potential lies." Then the light subsided, leaving them in stunned darkness. Solara, breathing heavily, looked at Ethan with a mix of awe and trepidation. "What was that?" He shook his head. "I'm not sure. But it means your heritage is real, that your so-called flaws are part of something ancient." She stared at the sphere, her voice trembling. "We have to show this to the council, or maybe not. If they see it, they might destroy it. or twist its meaning to maintain their claim of engineered perfection. Ethan exhaled. We need a plan. But one thing is certain. Your father's final decree wasn't just about forging alliances. He wanted you, and apparently me, to unlock this hidden legacy. And that might change everything. In the distance, the faint echoes of merrymaking from the wedding celebrations reverberated through the halls, oblivious to the monumental discovery transpiring in the archives. Celera and Ethan exchanged a resolute look. Their union had triggered a long-dormant power, and now, the course of the entire empire rested on how they chose to wield it. News spread rapidly that the princess and her new consort had been seen entering restricted sections of the archives. Though few knew precisely what transpired there, rumors quickly circulated about secret relics and unsettling energies. The Lumerian aristocracy, already uneasy about Solara's visible defects, now openly questioned whether King Varric's heir was delving into forbidden lore, an action many considered a direct challenge to centuries of carefully maintained genetic purity. Councillor Meraxis called an emergency session, convening not only the Imperial Council but also influential lords and ladies who held sway over the Empire's outer provinces. The grand chamber in which they assembled resembled a crystalline amphitheater, every polished facet reflecting the tension in the air. Ethan and Celera were summoned to stand at the center, surrounded on all sides by rows of austere faces. They arrived hand in hand, projecting solidarity even though a gnawing fear churned inside them. Princess Celera, Meraxis began, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the hall. It has come to our attention that you and Ambassador Carter entered a section of the archives deemed off-limits to all but the highest-ranked archivists. The council demands an explanation. Celera lifted her chin. I am the daughter of King Varric, heir to the throne. The archives should not be off-limits to me, particularly if they contain information pertinent to my lineage. A ripple of discontent stirred the counselors. Meraxis pressed on. And what did you hope to find, Princess? Dark relics that undermine the Empire's lawful quest for genetic excellence. Ethan stepped forward, careful to modulate his tone. We sought knowledge. In many civilizations, knowledge is the key to progress, not a threat. We discovered evidence that Princess Solara's traits are part of an ancient Lumerian heritage, not mere defects. At that, a murmur of disbelief and scorn swept the assembly. Lady Isona stood, her silver scales catching the light in a radiant display. The only heritage that matters is that of carefully refined genetics. Our empire has excelled precisely because we weeded out anomalies. We are the standard to which other species aspire. Are you suggesting, Ambassador, that our entire foundation is flawed? Ethan returned her piercing gaze steadily. Not flawed, but perhaps incomplete. I've seen with my own eyes that Solara's so-called imperfections resonate with a power lost to time. It may offer untapped potential for the Empire, potential King Varric recognized and sought to protect. A hush fell. Councillor Meraxis leaned forward, his translucent features stern. These are bold claims. Do you have proof? A simple rumor or flash of light in the archives does not overturn centuries of established doctrine. Celera straightened, determination blazing in her eyes. If I can demonstrate that my scales, my eyes, unlock something valuable to Lemuria's future, will you at least consider the possibility that your definition of perfection is too narrow? A mixture of outrage and curiosity flickered through the council. Meraxis seemed torn, for the Empire's traditions were deeply rooted, yet disregarding the princess outright could appear as a betrayal of the late king's will. Finally, the High Counselor spoke in measured tones. Very well, Princess, but you will do so under strict observation. We will organize a formal demonstration. If your so-called hidden power proves real and beneficial to the Empire, we may revisit our assumptions. But if this is a mere fantasy conjured by your father's favoritism, you will be expected to set aside such notions and perhaps relinquish your claim to the throne. Celera drew a sharp breath. I accept, she said, though a tremor coursed through her body. But the demonstration must happen where the artifact is stored, in the presence of unbiased observers. And I demand the right to include experts from outside the Lumerian Empire, if necessary, to ensure fairness. Meraxis inclined his head. Agreed, within reason. Do not think, however, that we will permit a horde of off-worlders to meddle in our sacred heritage. With that, the council session concluded, the gathered aristocrats dispersing in a whirlwind of hushed conversation. Ethan and Celera exchanged a fraught look, knowing they had gained a small reprieve, but also that the stakes had just soared sky-high. Outside the grand chamber, they found themselves escorted by an official retinue rather than the usual guarded watch. The message was clear. The Empire was keeping close tabs on them now, unwilling to let them stir up further secrets. Once safely in a private corridor, Celera let out a shaky breath. That was more intense than I expected. They truly see me as a threat. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her arm. You stood your ground. I'm proud of you. We'll figure out how to prove what we found in the archives. Maybe we can replicate that reaction we saw, or glean more clues from the ancient texts. She nodded, forcing a small smile. We'll need to prepare carefully. The Empire is a fortress of pride and tradition. If we fail to show them something undeniable, they'll silence us for good. He leaned in, lowering his voice. We won't fail. Together, we've already seen glimpses of what your father was hiding. Now, we just need to bring it into the light for all to see. Their eyes locked in shared resolve. Around them, the palace's corridors glowed with the usual dazzling splendor, but a new tension crackled through the air. In the days ahead, they would need every ounce of courage and cleverness to challenge a legacy guarded by centuries of dogma. Still, as they made their way back through the labyrinthine halls, Ethan couldn't help but feel that a wave of change was coming, one that might either elevate Celera to her rightful place, or drown them both in the Empire's unyielding pursuit of perfection. The formal demonstration was scheduled for a week's time, allowing the Council to assemble a panel of esteemed geneticists, archivists, and high-ranking nobility to witness whatever Celera and Ethan intended to show. The pressure mounted daily. Rumors flew across Lemuria Prime that the princess had unearthed a heretical artifact, that she intended to rewrite the Empire's genetic code, or even that she aimed to dissolve the monarchy altogether. Through it all, Ethan and Celera pored over the archives, guided by half-remembered tales from King Varric's private notes and the cryptic vision they had experienced. They found references to an era known as the Age of Divergence, when Lemurians had not yet succumbed to uniform standards of engineered beauty. The texts hinted that some Lemurians possessed unique traits, scales that changed color with emotional states, eyes capable of reading quantum fluctuations in starlight, or even spines that produced melodic frequencies. Over generations, these traits were systematically bred out, deemed too unpredictable for a society seeking total harmony. One evening, they stood in front of the Star Crown relic, the same sphere that had shown them flickering images of the past. Celera tentatively placed her scaled hand upon it, feeling the now familiar surge of energy. But this time, she kept her mind focused, striving to harness the orb's response. Ethan observed carefully. Try recalling the shapes you saw during our wedding ceremony, how the light patterns formed. A faint glow pulsed inside the sphere. Celera narrowed her eyes, as though reaching out with her mind, and the glow intensified, swirling with faint images of star-filled skies. Her breathing grew ragged, beads of sweat appearing on her brow. Ethan hurried to support her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Easy, he murmured, feeling a faint resonance himself, a soft tingling in his fingertips. Don't force it. She exhaled, stepping back. The sphere's light flickered, then dimmed. It feels like something is calling me, she whispered, but I can't fully grasp it. Maybe this is what Father meant, that my differences attune me to powers we abandoned long ago. Ethan nodded. Then we need to show the Council that it's real, that it's not dangerous but holds promise. Perhaps we can arrange a demonstration that triggers these responses in a measurable way, so the geneticists can't deny it. Their plan crystallized over the days that followed. They would replicate the conditions under which Celera had caused the orb to emit powerful energies, but this time in a controlled environment before the Empire's leading experts. If all went well, they would finally have proof that Celera's anomalies were assets, not defects. Yet, not everyone waited passively. The night before the scheduled demonstration, an alarm roused Ethan from his slumber in the guest chambers. Crimson lights flared in the corridors, accompanied by the sharp wail of security klaxons. Ethan rushed outside, colliding with a pair of panicked guards. What's happening? He demanded. One guard, breathless, managed to gasp. There's been a break-in at the restricted archives. Intruders attempted to sabotage certain artifacts, including the Star Crown. A cold shock ran through Ethan's veins. Without waiting for further explanation, he sprinted down the halls. His path was blocked by throngs of frantic courtiers until he reached the archive entrance, where a cluster of armed guards barred the way. The smell of scorched crystal lingered in the air, and the floor bore deep scorch marks as though from energy weapons. Among the cluster of onlookers, he spotted Celera, pale, trembling, her eyes fixed on the battered entrance. She rushed to him as soon as she saw him, her voice shaking. They tried to destroy the orb. The council told me they apprehended an unknown saboteur, but they won't let me see the damage yet. Her distress was palpable. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, guiding her away from the gawking crowd. Did they manage to destroy it? He asked in a hushed tone. She swallowed hard, tears gleaming in her eyes. I don't know, but if the Star Crown is gone, we'll have no proof tomorrow, and the council might accuse me of orchestrating this for my own ends. Their worst fears were confirmed a moment later when Lady Isona stepped forward, a grave expression etched across her perfect features. The device has been tampered with, Princess, she declared. Its integrity is compromised. We may be forced to postpone or cancel tomorrow's demonstration. Celera stiffened, her voice tight with indignation. Cancel it. We can't. I've spent weeks preparing. This is about the future of our empire. Isona's gaze flicked to Ethan, her eyes cold. I understand your frustration, but an attack has occurred in the heart of the palace, and the safety of everyone here is paramount. Perhaps it would be best for you both to remain in secure quarters until we ascertain the truth. Ethan could almost taste the bitterness in her words, the implied blame. He clenched his fists at his side, suppressing the urge to retaliate. With all due respect, Lady Isona, this demonstration is crucial. Postponing or canceling it only benefits those who want to keep Celera marginalized. Her lips curved in a thin, mocking smile. You overstep, Ambassador. In times of crisis, the Council decides what is best for the Empire, not you. And with that, she turned on her heel, leading a detachment of guards deeper into the restricted area. Several others approached Celera and Ethan, politely but firmly escorting them away. Late into the night, the palace buzzed with rumors, some claiming Celera orchestrated the sabotage to avoid proving her claims, others insisting a rogue faction of aristocrats aimed to destroy any evidence that might threaten the Empire's polished image. In their secluded quarters, Celera and Ethan paced, hearts pounding with frustration and dread. Without the Star Crown fully functional, their plan teetered on the brink of collapse. But neither was ready to give up. We can't let them bury this, Celera vowed, her voice trembling with resolve. Even if the orb is damaged, we can still show them something. We must not let them silence us. Ethan cupped her cheek gently, meeting her dark, fear-filled eyes. We won't. Whatever happens tomorrow, we stand united. The sabotage only proves that some force is desperate to keep the old ways intact. Maybe that means we're closer to the truth than they ever wanted. She nodded, taking comfort in the warmth of his hand against her scaled skin. Tomorrow, they would face an empire poised for upheaval, with enemies lurking in every gilded corridor. But they would also stand as living proof that difference could be a strength. And perhaps, just perhaps, they still held the key that would awaken a sleeping legacy, ushering in a new age for Lemuria. Morning came, and with it, the promise of the formal demonstration, though overshadowed by the sabotage of the night before. The council chambers were packed to capacity, an electric tension buzzing in the air. Celera and Ethan stood at the center of a circular platform, ringed by high-backed seats occupied by the most influential figures of Lemuria. The demonstration would be less theatrical than initially planned, stripped of some of the artifacts needed for a grand display. Yet they could still attempt to show that Solara's genetic anomalies were not mere defects, but carried the heritage of ancient powers. Councillor Meraxis presided from a raised dais. His features were carved from stoic stone as he introduced the proceedings. Princess Celera claims to bear a unique genetic code, one that resonates with artifacts of the Age of Divergence. Last night, a sabotage incident in the archives compromised the Star Crown relic, a matter currently under investigation. Nonetheless, We have permitted this demonstration to proceed, in the interest of transparency and in accordance with Princess Solara's royal standing." A hush fell as Solara stepped forward, dressed in a regal yet understated gown. She inhaled, steadying herself. "Counselors, lords, and ladies of Lemuria, I stand before you as the daughter of King Varec, charged by his final will to embrace my heritage. I understand many of you view my scales and eyes as imperfections, as blemishes. But I intend to show you that these differences connect me to a dormant legacy, one that could revitalize our empire's understanding of perfection." She glanced at Ethan, who nodded encouragement. Together, they approached a smaller version of the crystal orb, hastily salvaged from the main device. A group of Lumerian scientists stood nearby, their instruments ready to measure any energies emitted. With a deliberate motion, Solara placed her hand on the orb. Nothing happened at first. The sabotage had undoubtedly weakened the orb's connection. She closed her eyes, concentrating, willing the faint energies she had felt before to manifest again. A faint glow flickered across the orb's surface, but it was weak, sputtering like a dying star. The scientists exchanged uneasy glances, and the audience began to murmur skeptically. Counselor Meraxis frowned. Ethan could sense Solara's despair mounting. He stepped beside her, pressing his own hand against the orb, just as they had done in private. For a moment, he felt a jolt, an echo of that earlier resonance. He whispered urgently to her, "Remember how it felt when you first touched the star crown? The images, the words, the sense of belonging. Focus on that." Solara's shoulders tensed, then relaxed. She inhaled slowly, letting her breath flow into the depths of her being. Suddenly, the glow within the orb steadied, growing brighter by degrees. Gasps sounded from the scientists and spectators. From the heart of the orb, filaments of light reached out, outlining Solara's scaled arm in a shimmering aura. The instruments beeped, registering a low-frequency hum that built steadily in intensity. "She's generating a field of unknown origin," one of the scientists stammered, eyes wide. "It's reacting to her biosignature. Her scales are resonating at a quantum level I've never seen in standard Lemurians." An astonished hush fell over the chamber. Solara opened her eyes, which glowed faintly in reflection of the orb's light. "This is what my father believed in," she said, her voice echoing with a renewed strength. "A power that our empire chose to forget. It lies in the deviations, the so-called flaws, that were once abundant among our ancestors." An odd tension held the room captive, but not everyone was convinced. A figure rose from among the council, Lady Isona, her expression sharp as broken glass. "And what proof do we have that this phenomenon is beneficial rather than destructive? We've pursued centuries of careful engineering to safeguard stability, to ensure no catastrophic mutations erode our society. This demonstration proves only that anomalies persist, not that they are beneficial." A rumble of agreement rolled through a portion of the assembly. Solara's gaze faltered, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Ethan squeezed her hand, silently urging her to speak truth from her heart. "I cannot tell you precisely how this energy may benefit our empire," she admitted, her voice steady but humble. "But I know that it holds potential we have never explored. When we close ourselves to everything but what we deem perfect, we risk stagnation, fear, and the cruelty of uniform expectation. My father believed in evolution, not of forced genetic perfection, but of embracing the unknown." Her voice rose, resonating with the sphere's soft glow. "If you shut the door on me, on what I represent, you also shut the door on your own future. Our strength lies not in smoothing away every rough edge, but in finding the hidden facets that could illuminate new paths." A wave of silence swept over the chamber. Then, in the midst of that charged stillness, Counselor Meraxis stood, his translucent form catching the orb's glow. His expression was unreadable, but when he finally spoke, his tone was measured, almost subdued. "The council sees your demonstration, Princess Solara," he declared. "This energy is undeniable. We do not fully understand it, nor do we know if it poses risks. But for now, the crown recognizes you as your father intended, his heir, bearing a legacy that diverges from our established norm." An undercurrent of dismay rippled through certain factions of nobles, but others seemed struck by a cautious curiosity, perhaps sensing the first cracks in their rigid worldview. Ethan and Celera remained standing, hearts pounding. Lady Isona's cold stare lingered, hinting that this small victory was only the beginning of a larger battle. Yet in that moment, the hush in the council hall felt like the dawn of a new era, a reluctant acknowledgement that the Empire's unyielding pursuit of flawless symmetry might no longer be the only path forward. In the weeks that followed, Solara's position as princess, and Ethan's role as her consort, was tentatively accepted by the majority of the Empire's ruling circles. Resistance persisted among certain traditionalists, but the shocking sabotage attempt, coupled with Solara's demonstration, had forced many to reconsider their stance. Quietly, some even admitted a sense of wonder at what might arise if Lemuria opened itself to the dynamic possibilities of genetic diversity. Celera was formally crowned as the new sovereign, though she took on the title of Queen Regent rather than Empress, a nod to the transitional phase the Empire found itself in. Ethan stood at her side, recognized not just as a political figure from Earth, but as a partner who had helped uncover an ancient power that once lay dormant. The changes were not merely symbolic. Under Solara's direction, a new council was convened to explore the Age of Divergence relics and to study her unique scales and eyes. Allies from other Federation worlds joined these efforts, fascinated by the sudden shift in Lumerian policies. Earth dispatched a team of scientists and diplomats to work closely with Lumerian geneticists, fostering an unprecedented collaborative environment. Meanwhile, daily life on Lemuria Prime began to transform. Citizens who had hidden their own minor defects began to step forward, emboldened by the knowledge that their new queen bore her differences with pride. Some wore garments that accentuated small anomalies, from subtle patches of scales to unique irises that shimmered like living nebulae. The taboo around imperfection slowly eroded, replaced by tentative acceptance that perhaps not every deviation was a threat to stability. Of course, not everyone embraced the shift. Whispers of dissent echoed through marble corridors, with certain nobles secretly meeting to discuss ways to reinstate strict genetic controls. But for the moment, Celera and Ethan's successes had the upper hand, buoyed by King Varric's posthumous authority and the undeniable evidence presented at the demonstration. It was amidst this evolving landscape that Ethan and Celera found themselves standing on a palace balcony, gazing out at a sunrise that cast the crystal city in hues of gold and rose. The new queen leaned on the railing, her iridescent hair fluttering in the warm breeze, while Ethan stood close enough to feel the gentle brush of her scales against his sleeve. "I still can't believe how much has changed," Celera said, her tone a quiet reverence. "Part of me feared the council would exile me, or worse, when we challenged their convictions. But now they look to me for guidance." Ethan smiled softly. "They're starting to see you for who you really are, a leader who won't hide her true self. Sometimes, that's all it takes to spark a revolution of thought." She turned to him, her expressive eyes brimming with emotion. "I couldn't have done this without you. Father may have chosen you for diplomatic reasons, but I think he also saw your spirit. You're the one who gave me the courage to speak up, to believe my differences were worth celebrating." He took her hand, lacing his fingers gently with hers. "You had that courage inside you all along. I just reminded you it was there." They shared a tender smile, the warm light of dawn washing over them. Yet their moment of serenity was interrupted by a soft knock. A palace aide approached, bowing respectfully. "Your Majesty, Ambassador Carter, forgive me for disturbing you, but there is an urgent matter. A delegation from the outer provinces has just arrived. They bring news of a strange phenomenon. Something about ancient Lumerian technology reactivating near the crystal forests." Celera and Ethan exchanged intrigued looks. "We'll come at once," she said, her heart fluttering with an odd mixture of excitement and concern. Moments later, they stood in a nearby chamber where the provincial delegates relayed their astonishing report. According to eyewitness accounts, large crystalline formations in the equatorial forests had begun to resonate with an unusual frequency, a phenomenon not seen in centuries. Some believed it was linked to the awakening energies that followed Solara's demonstration with the Star Crown. Others feared it could be a harbinger of calamity. Ethan listened attentively, recalling what Celera had shared about those very forests, how she longed to see them one day. Maybe we should investigate, he suggested. If it's connected to the power in your scales, then understanding it could be crucial for the Empire. Celera nodded, already making decisions as a monarch. Yes, we'll assemble a team. Scientists, historians, and, well, anyone who can help us uncover what's happening. This might be the next piece of our puzzle. The delegates seemed relieved, hopeful that their queen would address the matter personally. As they departed, Ethan and Celera shared a resolute look. They had unsealed one secret from Lemuria's past, but it appeared there were more locked doors waiting to be opened. In that shared moment, they both felt the heady sense of stepping into a new era, an era where imperfection might not only be tolerated but celebrated, where hidden energies would awaken long-lost technology, and where the blending of two worlds, Earth and Lemuria, promised discoveries that neither could have achieved alone. Years passed, and the once rigid contours of Lemurian society softened under Solara's wise, compassionate reign. The Empire continued its transformation, embracing the potentials that sprang from genetic variants and the rediscovery of ancient relics. The crystal forests, once silent, sang with renewed life as previously dormant mechanisms flickered into activity, forging new paths in medicine, energy, and interplanetary collaboration. Earth became a trusted ally, providing scientific insight and cultural exchange. Over time, joint research teams unveiled wonders that merged Lumerian crystal tech with human innovation, propelling both worlds into a renaissance of progress. In the heart of the Empire's capital, the Grand Palace brimmed with visitors from across the Galactic Federation, each eager to learn about the extraordinary turn of events. At the center of it all stood Queen Celera, her once malign scales now recognized as the herald of a different kind of perfection, one that valued every unique trait. Standing faithfully by her side was Ethan Carter, still an ambassador, but also much more, her husband, her partner, and her steadfast believer in the power of differences. Their bond had blossomed into love, an affection forged in hardship and tempered by shared dreams. And so, when their daughter was born, a bright-eyed child possessing the gentle scales of her mother and the warm smile of her father, the entire Empire rejoiced. The infant princess giggled in the glow of the star-crown orb, which now served as a ceremonial relic for the royal family, its energies harmonizing with the new generation. On her naming day, a hush fell throughout the palace as the child reached out with chubby, scaled fingers and touched the orb. A surge of light illuminated the grand rotunda, refracting across the assembled faces. The orb sang, a melodic resonance as if welcoming the fusion of two worlds. Scientists rushed to record the phenomenon, but beneath the data and measurements lay a simpler truth. Imperfection was not weakness, but the seed of profound, wondrous change. The child, heir to both Earth and Lemuria, symbolized a new epoch, one that would guide the galaxy into broader horizons. Standing at the ceremony's edge, Ethan and Celera exchanged a tender glance. They remembered their tumultuous beginning, the skeptical gazes, the council's uproar, the sabotage, the fragile alliance that blossomed into something beautiful. Now, they witnessed the next generation taking its first steps toward a destiny more harmonious, diverse, and open than any dream once permitted. The crowd broke into joyous applause as the orb's light settled back into a gentle glow, leaving echoes of cosmic song drifting in the vast chamber. The new princess blinked her large eyes, peering at the gathered throng with innocent wonder. In that gaze, the entire empire glimpsed a hopeful reflection of the path it had chosen. Thus, the final chapter of suspicion and prejudice gave way to a future shaped by inclusion, where engineered symmetry stood side by side, with natural variety, each strengthening the other. King Varek's final will, once seen as scandalous, had proven itself an inspired vision, uniting two souls to unlock a heritage poised to reshape the galaxy. And as Ethan and Celera cradled their daughter, they knew that neither flawless forms nor carefully curated genes could surpass the boundless potential of a child born from love, courage, and the acceptance of every aspect that made her unique. Beneath the shimmering vault of the Lumerian sky, they closed their eyes, letting the cheers and blessings wash over them. A new dawn had truly arrived, radiant with promise, and from that day forward, The galaxy would never be the same. Happily, joyfully so.